Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into something that really shapes our world every single day, the power of images. You know, we're surrounded by them all the time, but how much do we actually understand their influence? Now, for those of you in my AMC class, this is right at the core of what we study. But honestly, for everyone, this is a crucial skill for just navigating modern life.
So let's kick things off with this really powerful idea from the philosopher Guy Debord. All that once was directly lived has become mere representation. Just think about that for a second. He wrote this way back in 1967. That's long before Instagram or TikTok even existed. It brings up a huge question for us today, right? What happens to our reality when so much of it is filtered through the images we're constantly seeing and sharing?
And for my AMC students, you'll recognize this immediately. It fits perfectly into our work on representations du monde, and specifically, our axis on how media and images circulate and influence us. The skills we're building here, learning how to analyze the way images travel online and shape what we believe, are absolutely vital.
So here's the main question we're going to be wrestling with today. In a world that is just overflowing with images, how do they actually build what we think of as real? And maybe more importantly, how can we get better at looking past the surface to really understand the message and the power that's hiding behind them?
Okay, here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack a really important idea, the modern economy. Then, we'll get into two super interesting case studies, one on humanitarian aid photos and the other on crime scene forensics. After that, we'll get practical and look at how you can build a really sharp analysis for your assessments, and we'll wrap it all up by thinking about what all this means for you, personally.
All right, let's dig into our first big idea. Before we can even start to critique images, we have to get our heads around the world they live in. And trust me, it's a world on an almost unimaginable scale. Some people call this the economy.
So what on earth is the economy? Well, the best way to think about it is that images today act kind of like a currency. They're made and shared at lightning speed, and as they move around, they build value. Things like social status, influence, maybe even connection. They've become totally fundamental to how we make sense of the world and each other.
And if you want to really feel the scale of this, just look at this number, 4,000. That's not per day, not per hour. That's how many photos are uploaded to Facebook every single second. That's, what, over 350 million a day? It's not a stream of images, it's an absolute flood. And that's the environment we're trying to navigate.
And this brings us right back to Guy Debord. His idea of this society of the spectacle is so key here. He argued that modern life has shifted from being about authentic experience, about being, to being all about appearances, about appearing. And it's not just about showing off, it's economic. The spectacle, as he put it, is capital accumulated to the point where it becomes image. In other words, images aren't just pictures. They're deeply tied to money and power. Okay. Enough theory for a minute. Let's see how this stuff actually plays out in the real world with our first case study. We're going to look at the powerful, and often pretty controversial, world of humanitarian imagery. What's so fascinating here is the power dynamic that often becomes immediately obvious. Humanitarian photos tend to tell a very specific kind of story. On one side, you have the West, which is usually portrayed as active, as saviors, as the ones who are there to help. And on the other side, the global South is so often shown as just passive victims. This creates what some critics call a politics of pity, which can end up reinforcing stereotypes instead of actually challenging them. Now let's switch gears for our second case study, which shows a completely different use of the image. Here, the goal isn't to create an emotional response like pity. The goal is to establish objective proof. We are talking about forensic photography. This is a fantastic early example from a 19th century pioneer in forensics named Alphonse Bertillon. And I really want you to look closely here. The point isn't just to show the room. Do you see the grid lines and the rulers? They're there to measure and to catalog everything, to turn the chaos of a crime scene into cold, hard data. This is what we call the birth of the forensic gaze.
And this slide, wow, it shows the evolution of that gaze perfectly. On the left, you've got a clay model from the early 20th century, a super detailed physical reconstruction of a crime scene. And on the right, a modern VR simulation, a digital twin. The technology has changed like you wouldn't believe, but the goal is exactly the same, to rebuild a version of the truth that you can examine from every possible angle.
This brings us to a really powerful tool for your own analysis. The historian Carlo Ginzburg called it the evidential paradigm. Basically, it's the idea that you find the truth not by looking at the big, obvious thing in the picture, but by focusing on the small, overlooked details, the little clues that everyone else might miss.
It's about learning to read an image like a detective, looking for the things it doesn't scream at you.
Okay, so how do we take all these big, cool ideas and actually turn them into a killer analysis for your assessments? Well, this next section is all about giving you the practical tools to do exactly that.
This right here is your secret weapon. It's a super simple formula for a perfect analytical paragraph. Just 3 steps. First, state your idea. What's your main point about the image? Second, provide a specific example, a detail you can literally point to. And third, explain your analysis. Connect that example back to your main idea. Just remember, idea, example, explanation. Easy.
And look, to really take your analysis to the next level, you need the right language. Here are some of the key terms we've been using today. Don't just throw them in for no reason. Use them to show that you have a deep, sophisticated understanding of how these images work. Words like representation, power dynamics, and the evidential paradigm are your tools for a much sharper critique.
Okay, let's start to wrap this up by bringing it all back together. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just an academic exercise. Learning to analyze images is a critical skill for making your way through the world we live in, and for understanding your own place in it.
Just look at these 2 images. They're of the exact same place, a courtroom. On the left, you have an artist's sketch. It's emotional, right? It captures the atmosphere of the trial. On the right, a photograph of the empty room. It's precise, it feels objective, it captures the space. So, which one is the true version? Well, the answer is neither. They are both representations, and each one makes a choice that creates a different reality, shaping how we think about something as important as justice itself.
So, to quickly recap, we live in an economy, a world where images don't just show us reality, they actively build it. We've seen this in action from the politics of pity in humanitarian photos all the way to the search for objective proof in forensics. And we've learned that our best tool for taking these images apart is the evidential paradigm, looking for the clues hidden in the details.
And that leaves me with one final question for you. Because you're not just a passive observer in all this. Every single day you participate in this economy. So the next time you see an image and you're about to like it or share it, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what reality am I helping to create right now?